I was coerced by a coworker to put a banana outfit on and act in a play.
Does this coworker have a name?
He does. I'm not going to call him out.
I know it.
Yeah. But that has been with me for the rest of my life now. That was 15 years ago, and people are still like, hey, Banana Man. Hi, everybody. I'm Matt.
And I'm Jen.
And you're listening to the Matt and Jen Show. Join us each week as we discuss all things worship,
leadership,
and life. Combined, we have over 20 years of worship leading experience.
We're songwriters and recording artists, parents to 6 amazing humans,
and 1 sock-eating dog.
We love Jesus and we love people.
Thanks for hanging out with us. Hey everyone, welcome to episode number 3 of the Matt and Jen Show. How are you? Really? How are you doing? Today, Jen and I will be talking about authenticity. Normally, when people think about being authentic, it's because they want others to trust them. Authenticity is seen as a good thing. But is there ever a time when we should be inauthentic? Yes. Yes, there is. And as a matter of fact, we're going to talk about that today. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation. Today, we're talking about something that's really cool.
Yes.
As opposed to uncool.
Lame.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something lame.
Okay. I was just thinking, I had like 8 things go through my mind.
As per usual.
Lame things, yeah. So
such as?
Yeah.
Come on.
Not even going to go there.
All right.
Today, we are talking about authenticity.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be an authentic person?
Yeah. Well, and that's the one thing that we got as a word from God in prayer the beginning of the year was authenticity and testimony being things that we were to focus on in understanding, you know, with Him, how He wanted us to move forward. So what does it mean to be authentic in the things that we do?
I think when people hear the word authentic, the first thing that comes to me is real.
Yeah.
Right? You don't want a fake something.
Yeah.
But I think there's more to it, and we're going to unpack.
Well, we are. And I think that's the thing, you know, when we're moving forward in this step of faith, the last thing we want is to be inauthentic in a negative way, because that's not what we're doing this for, right? We want to follow Him. We want to follow Jesus. So, of course, we want to be authentic. I think we've seen a lot of the inauthentic in various realms in society, and definitely even in the church. And that's something that you and I both, we want to stay away from that.
Yeah.
Because it's just empty.
Yeah.
That's an empty lifestyle. And there's definitely the possibility of moving forward and in different audiences, people actually feeling like that's what we're doing. And so that's kind of the prayer for us always is, Jesus, let us be walking with you and saying the things we really mean.
Yeah, I think my goal has always been to be, so as I've led worship, I want to be the same person leading worship as I am if somebody meets me at Walmart and they talk to me and I act the same way.
Right.
Like, I think...
Not put on.
Yeah. So years ago, the one act I think of maybe not being authentic that I can think of from years ago is I was coerced by a coworker to put a banana outfit on and act in a play. Does this
coworker have a name?
He does. I'm not going to call him out.
I know it.
Yeah. But that has been with me for the rest of my life now. That was 15 years ago, and people are still like, hey, Banana Man.
So you didn't truly feel like a banana?
No, I don't feel like if I was going to be a part of the fruit kingdom,
right,
that I would be a banana.
True.
Yeah.
What fruit would you choose to be and
I don't
why?
know. This is going off the rails real quick.
Okay.
I want to be real here. Let's be authentic.
Yeah. So when we decided that we were going to talk about authenticity, because this has been a part of our walk in our prayer life for the last few months, I thought I'm going to look into what other people have to say about authenticity.
Right.
And so a lot of things that were coming up were actually in the realm of psychology and not so much in Christianity. So I kind of wanted to unpack a little bit of that. What does the world say about authenticity?
Yeah.
And interestingly, it's a really big buzzword. It's almost been overkilled in the area of business and leadership because I think people are craving authenticity. So what does that mean? And with the world and in what psychology says about authenticity is that it's about the self. It's about being true to yourself. And so I think there's maybe a little bit of a conflict between what the world says about authenticity and what Christianity requires potentially in authenticity. So the interesting thing is that in psychology, talking about being true to yourself is actually a really important thing for mental health. And so I was watching this one, I don't think it was a TED Talk, but it was a lecture of some kind by Gabor Mate. I think I'm saying his name right.
Yeah, I think so.
And the discussion was the need for authenticity. And my understanding in his practice, he's a medical doctor, is that he deals with a lot of people who have chronic illness and even terminal people. So what he said about authenticity is it's a survival need, that we all need authenticity in our lives, and that we need to be in touch with our needs and our feelings. And where authenticity is threatening attachment, because we also have the need for attachment, we'll learn to suppress our authenticity for attachment. So
we sacrifice being authentic so that we can connect with people.
Right, and especially at a young age, children, say with a mother or a father who has difficulty with managing the needs of their child, the child will actually suppress their actual survival needs in order to maintain that attachment with a parent, which is why abuse is a really difficult thing for people to deal with in childhood, because they'll choose attachment. So let's say you have a mother who has issues with anger and she's explosive about that, and the child has a need and they see that mom is explosive, then they will suppress saying something that they need in order for mom to be happy and to keep that relationship with mom. So it can be very damaging.
That would seem like even in cases of domestic abuse,
yes,
typically you see, or what you hear of, is a woman being abused by a man, and they stay with the man.
Yeah.
And you, from the outside, you think, how could that be?
Right.
This would lend to, if that attachment is needed, or if people feel like they need to be attached to that person, then they will push down their authenticity or their true self.
Right. And so what happens in that is the person becomes very unhealthy. So apparently a lot of people who have long-term chronic illnesses like fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, cancers, things like that, what Gabor Mate says is they have 4 things in common, which I found really interesting. So this is talking about when you're not allowed to express your authentic feelings, your authentic self. These people who end up with chronic illness, they all have a compulsive regard for other people's emotions over their own.
Wow.
And so, he talked about the expression of the good die young is a very reasonable expression and potentially could have connections to this, where they're not regarding their own feelings. They're putting other people's feelings over their own.
Right.
Number 2, the suppression of their own negative emotions actually suppresses their immune system. And I'll talk about how that happens. That they're responsible for other people's feelings. So when someone else expresses anger or sadness, that person actually feels like
they take it on.
They've caused that, or they need to fix it, or both.
Okay.
Which is unhealthy.
Yep.
And then the last one is that they must never disappoint and they must never say no. And so he gave an example of this one woman who came in and was diagnosed with breast cancer. And her first question was about how she was going to emotionally support her husband through it, because she was actually his second wife and his first wife had died of breast cancer. So instead of looking at the impact of the illness on her, what she was going to face in terms of chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, whatever, her first question was about how she could emotionally support her husband. So there's an imbalance when we push down how we're feeling and what our needs are.
People would see this as an emotional thing or a psychological thing, but it's actually causing
physical
problems in the body.
Right. So what he said is when we say no to our emotions, at some point our body will say no to us. And how he described it was that there's the brain-body connection, which is kind of a buzzword right now, like mind, body, spirit. We talk about those things, but it's really interesting what they're finding in science. So they're saying that there's a relationship between the brain, the immune system, the gut. They all talk to each other, and there are biochemical things that happen between those things.
Hormonal responses. Yeah.
So the study is called psychoneuroimmunology. So it's talking about the effect on the immune system when we suppress our emotions. They're connected, right? So they found out with the immune system that they've called it the floating brain.
Oh, wow.
Because the immune system can learn. The immune system has a memory, and it has a reactive capacity, exactly like the brain. So it makes sense that when our thoughts become ill, over time, our bodies can become ill by our thoughts,
right,
and our feelings. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, and I think in the church, I think we talked about this in episode 1, I come from a Pentecostal background, and in a charismatic way of thinking about things. When you think about negative things, sometimes the jump is the demonic, or this is Satan is out to get me. That's what's causing these things. And I think at some level, I'm not disagreeing with those things, but when you think negative things, it's reasonable to think that there are hormonal responses in the brain based on those negative things.
Right.
Right? So there's that connection there between what you think and what happens in your body. It's not as metaphysical as some people would believe.
Right.
It's directly physical. What you think, negative or positive,
Yeah.
If you think positively, you get a good feeling about things. If you think negatively, it can cause anxiety. Well, where's the anxiety coming from? There's a hormonal response in the body that's causing these things, to happen.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of scriptures that would support that too, right? Managing our thoughts. But I think, one of the things we're talking about authenticity. So from the world perspective, if we're just keeping it to, to my own self be true, there's difficulty in that in the Christian world because we're told to go out to the nations, right? We're supposed to love other people. That's really the whole banner of it.
Yeah.
And so what do we do with that? How do we balance if authenticity is being true to myself, which I don't think is like completely the case. As Christians, we can't just walk in, well, I'm going to do what I feel. That's not what I'm talking about. But to acknowledge that we do have feelings, we do have negative feelings, and we need to be able to deal with them in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And so, coming from the world, one of the things that I noticed about the church that broke my heart, actually, is that leaders are held to a higher standard, which I think they should be, but in such a way of judgment and shame when something goes wrong. And I wonder if there's a connection between leaders not being able to process things in a healthy human way, because leaders are human beings, where it leads to, a burnout or an inauthentic thing, illness, moral failure, things like that. And one of the scriptures that I think we sort of relate, maybe not in the best way, is Ephesians 4:31. Now, I agree with the scripture, just sometimes what we do with it could be a problem.
Right.
So the scripture is, let all bitterness and wrath and anger and clamor and slander be put away from you, along with all malice. Be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving each other, just as God in Christ also has forgiven you. Now, of course, I agree with all of that, but I think what sometimes we do is when we do feel angry, we immediately attribute it to shame. I'm not allowed to feel angry. I have to forgive, which we do. We're called to forgive, but we shove down what we're feeling in order to get past it and feel like we're doing what's right with God. So I don't know, what you think about that in terms of, because you've grown up in the church and because you've been a pastor and a leader, what does that mean for you with authenticity, and how do you manage that?
I think the struggle with it sometimes is, as a Christian, so growing up in a charismatic setting and going to Bible college and being a pastor, you have this understanding that, you want to be a good Christian. You want to be Christ-like.
Right.
So you want to measure your responses to things to how Jesus would respond to things.
Yeah.
But we typically shy away from Jesus flipping tables over in the temple,
Yeah.
right? And being angry.
Right.
And there is a passage, I think we're going to get to it later, that says, in your anger, don't sin.
Yeah.
Right?
I think it's also
Ephesians
4:26.
Right. But I think people have a hard time associating a negative emotion
Right.
with not sinning.
Right.
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 So anger, in that passage, it talks about bitterness. Ephesians 4:28. One of the words is bitterness.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to be a bitter person. I think bitterness is something that, as a Christian, I don't want to hold on to.
No.
I don't think Jesus was bitter.
No.
And I asked you about this earlier, and you remember what you said when I said, we don't want to be bitter, so...
Well, I bet you there's a correlation between chronic illness and bitterness. So we've just talked about medically what happens there, and even in learning about praying through things with people and generational things and whatever, we talk about roots of pain being in bitterness. And I think really what bitterness is just prolonged anger.
Yeah, unresolved.
Unresolved anger.
So Jesus walks into the temple and he sees people ripping off. I mean, the context of it is everyone has to go to Jerusalem to celebrate this festival, and you're not going to travel with all the sacrifices you have to bring, right? Like, you have to bring goats and sheep and birds and all this sort of stuff. You're not going to travel from a 10-day journey with all of that stuff.
Right.
You got to bring your family. You don't want to be burdened. You got to get back to the field. I don't know. But you just can't bring all that stuff. So they would buy them in Jerusalem, and Jesus had seen them bring these things into the temple, these tables where they were selling these things, and they were selling them for exorbitant prices. They're basically gouging each other.
Right.
Hey, you have to sacrifice, but this bird would normally be $1. I'm going to sell it to you for $25.
Right.
And it was punishing people. It was causing them to not be able to follow what God asked them to do. So Jesus got angry, and the result of his anger was he flipped tables over.
Right.
So that's not just talk therapy, right? Like, what do we do with that?
Right.
In his anger,
Yeah.
it wasn't sin that he flipped the tables over.
Right.
Well, that's vandalism. Is Jesus vandalizing? No, he's expressing his righteous anger,
Yeah.
and he dealt with it. So it didn't have a chance to become bitterness.
Right. So do you find in church culture that there's room for authenticity?
I think in a case like that where somebody's angry, I've even said this, the first, and I mean, I'm guilty of this, the first thing you say is, well, we need to work towards forgiveness. And it's just lack of experience and lack of understanding emotion and dealing with people with emotion. Like, when you go through Bible college, you learn a lot of great things. You learn about the Hebrew language, you learn about the Bible, you learn about God, you know how to lead people in worship, how to lead people in prayer, those types of things, which are great things. They're needed things. They're fantastic.
Yeah.
There's very little in counseling. And in fact, pastors aren't able to say that they're counselors because we're not.
Right.
We haven't been trained in it.
Right.
We can counsel in spiritual matters, but this is what comes up, right?
Yeah.
So what do you do with somebody with anger? Well, our default is we need to be able to work towards forgiveness.
Yeah.
And you do.
Right.
You have to be able to do that. But I think a lot of times in the church, when people are expressing an emotion, our reaction as leaders tends to be, let's be Christ-like.
Right.
Jesus was nice and loving and kind. But we don't think...
He was also righteous.
He was also righteous, and he was also flipping tables over.
Yeah.
And
That's not to condone anger and rage and flipping things.
Of course not. No. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying people, I think, sometimes aren't allowed, either because someone isn't allowing them to, or they don't allow themselves.
Sure.
Out of some sort of twisted obligation to getting things perfect.
Right.
I'm a Christian now. I've got to get this perfect. I've got to
Right.
act loving and kind. And those are all fruits of the Spirit. And if I don't act like that,
Right.
then I must not be a real, true Christian.
Right. Right. I
Which
think
is-
most people deal with it. And I think leaders and pastors deal with it too.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you're already saying, when I'm counseling someone, spiritually speaking, and I may jump to that thing of we need to be forgiving, I think it can create an environment where you yourself know that. And so if you're dealing with those emotions, it causes either you to suppress those feelings for yourself and never express that those are your strugglings, or you at least pretend that you're not dealing with it because you're not supposed to as a leader.
Right.
Which I don't think is fair. Like, that's where I'm saying that breaks my heart, because I've seen that happen where, leaders are just ripped apart, whether to their face or behind their back. Those things affect a person, and those things can weigh on a person.
I would say most of the time it's behind their back.
Yes.
At least that's where it starts. And it usually starts talking to a friend. I just have a concern about
concerned.
Pastor Matt. Here's the thing. Oh, man, I'm concerned about him too. Let me tell this other person how concerned I am.
Yeah.
And all of this concern,
Yeah.
which is not concern, it's just lies. It's
Well,
lies.
it's gossip.
Yeah.
But if you know that, you're already expressing that you know that. And so that would create in you the behavior to not discuss those things.
Right. I mean, to be vulnerable like that,
Right.
man, if I let people know that I sin
Right.
or have sinned,
Right.
done.
Yeah. Oh, completely
There's very little
done.
grace.
Completely done.
I have a story. I'm not pastoring currently, so I
Right.
can say this story.
Okay. Okay, I'm ready.
So I had someone come to me who was leading worship, who was dealing with sin.
Yeah.
And this person was really authentic and genuine in expressing to themselves and very vulnerable to me.
Yeah.
Not really knowing what my response would be,
Right.
but knowing
Which is amazing.
the typical pastoral response. This is how it goes. Person enters your office, sits down, says, I'm dealing with this sin. I'm a leader. I'm in a leadership position, a public leadership position.
Yeah.
Pastor says, well, you need to take a break until you deal with that sin.
Right.
And done.
Yeah,
and
which
that
teaches that person
if I want to be in this position, I need to hide the
it.
sin.
Yeah.
So typically then what happens is, okay, I'm going to work on this. And they don't, because there's no accountability. There's no follow-up.
Right.
So my response in it was, I mean, my concern is for the person. And I would tell people on the worship team this, or the people that I worked with all the time, is I care more about you than I do your gift.
Yeah.
Which means if somebody's struggling with something, I don't want to use you
Right.
because I need your gift. I would
Right.
rather you be healed. But in this case, it was a matter of, listen, you're getting help. This person had said they're getting help. They're talking with somebody who's knowledgeable in it and being mentored. And I said, okay, that's great. Keep me posted. Keep me updated on how your journey goes. And this person's response was, okay, so I guess I'm done in leadership. And my response was, why?
Right.
Why would you? I mean, I understand why you're thinking that, because that's going to be the typical response
That has been the culture, I think.
Yep. But if we want to create authenticity in people, we need to understand that people are people and they struggle.
Yeah.
And even if you give someone a position of responsibility and authority, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're perfect people all of a sudden. I mean, as someone training worship leaders, I don't want worship leaders to be like in depths of sin.
No.
I think there needs to be some maturity. I think for someone to accept Jesus, to really turn their life around and have a transformative experience and then put them in front of everyone to lead worship, I think that is doing a disservice to that person.
Right.
Like, you've got to drink the milk. Paul talks about, I think in Ephesians, being babies who drink milk for nourishment and then moving to meat.
Yeah.
Right? And so there's a progression that has to happen. And I'm not going to put somebody in a position that's going to hurt them just because I need to fill a spot. So I think this person being authentic was an amazing thing.
Yeah.
But more often than not in the church, that's not allowed. It's kind of, I'm going to keep this quiet.
Yeah.
And there does get to be a progression sometimes where you have to say, hey, listen, your life isn't lining up with the values that we hold, so we need you to step back.
Yeah, and we've talked to you about this, and we've offered the support and the help, and
Right.
you're still choosing to continue in this, and we've had multiple conversations.
Right.
Then at that point, if you're still choosing, no, I am gonna continue in this sin, then this is what it's gonna mean for a time. But that doesn't mean you're shunned from the church. It doesn't mean that you're shunned from our family. We love you. I think that needs to be the main message, is that people are loved and that there's room to be, like you're saying, authentic. I think it's incredibly brave for that person to come in and say that to you.
Yes.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
So, I mean, in the church, typically my experience has been, and I'm not saying in every place, right?
No,
You're
no,
going to
no,
get people listening to this going, that's not my
What?
experience.
Which is fantastic.
But my thought is, if I'm being honest, more often than not, I would say 80% of the time, people are feeling like they need to hide things or they'll be judged.
Yeah.
And this is a separate issue from like whether you're living in sin, right? This is an issue of like, if I really show people what I'm like, will they really accept me?
Yeah.
And as leaders, I think we have a responsibility to be authentic with people, to take them from one place to another.
Yeah.
And not feel threatened. I don't know what it is. Like, if I give this person a chance and they're still in sin, I feel threatened for some reason. And so they can't be in that position. It's almost like the pressure to be that perfect pastor or that perfect leader is kind of like, I need my followers to be perfect too. But we're not perfect.
No.
And this is the twist in it all, is we see ourselves maybe in a light that's not authentic, right? We're looking through glasses of what we think we're like,
Yeah.
instead of what we really are.
True. And I mean, God said to me a while ago, you can only go as far as the boundaries of your authenticity. So he's not fooled. So even if we fool people for a time and we pretend and by inauthentic, I mean really being fake. I'm just pretending I'm this person.
Yeah.
But really I'm not. Like, God is not fooled. So like if you're wanting to move in ministry or really in anything in life, you know, what God is saying to me is you're only going to go as far as your authenticity takes you. So regardless of how many people you fool, you're not going to fool God.
Right.
So then the question becomes, what's the answer to that then? How do we move forward in actually being authentic and creating an environment that's healthy for people to grow?
I think it starts with the individual. I think of, even as we were talking, Matthew 22, where Jesus says, you know, the greatest commandment is this: love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind.
Yeah.
And love your neighbor like you love yourself. Mm-hmm. Right? So there's the two commandments: love God with everything and love your neighbor like you love yourself. And in that second part, there's this understanding that in order to love your neighbor, you have to love yourself. So in order to be authentic, you have to be good with yourself. I've struggled with this, loving myself. Mm-hmm. And I think it's still in progress. Over time, people, you know, they act a certain way to get a certain response from the people around them.
Right.
And you get into this point where you're comfortable. Yeah. So how do you get to the point where you can be authentic and comfortable? And sometimes I think it takes risk. I think you have to be willing to surround yourself with people who love you.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is not easy to find.
It's not. And actually, I think that list is going to be smaller rather than bigger for everybody. But initially, but I don't think that that's a negative thing. I don't think, like, people want to be loved.
Yeah.
We've been created. God has created us to be social, to be needing of each other and connection. Even Adam and Eve, right at the beginning, it's not good for man to be alone. So made him a helper. And even in that helper, and this is a whole other tangent, I won't get on this rabbit trail, but it wasn't a hierarchical Adam is above Eve.
Right.
Or Eve is above Adam.
Right.
It was, you are meant to be partners to complete each other.
Right.
To help each other.
Right.
So having that type of network of people that are there to help you is important. But once you have that, and once you recognize who those people are, I think the goal of every person should be to be who they are, because the world needs who God created them to be.
Absolutely.
God created you to fit a certain area. He gave you gifts and talents and abilities and a heart and a passion to reach people that I maybe can't reach.
Right.
And the same is true of me. So to love God and to love people and then love your neighbor starts with you got to love yourself, and you got to be true to yourself.
Yeah.
So there is some truth into to thine own self be true.
Right.
But that's only part of the equation. The other part is you have the outward. You have to love people.
Right.
You have to express that love. And this is where walking with God, the fruits of the Spirit are love, joy, peace, kindness, goodness, faithfulness and self-control, right? Mm-hmm. Those are fruits. Those are things that as you walk with God, those are the things that are going to come out. Yeah. So eventually that's how you want to represent yourself to the world. But this is a process, and you need to be kind to yourself and love yourself and, give yourself a break sometimes. The other thing to consider, I don't know if we want to get into this right now, but it's actually not being authentic, but being inauthentic in some ways.
Okay.
So to really push boundaries, sometimes to grow as a person maybe means being inauthentic. And I know that you have some stuff that you're going to share about this. So I'm going to just let you talk about that first.
Oh, well, you're talking about inauthentic, not in a bad way, not in the I'm fake.
No.
But in a way that I feel uncomfortable with where I'm trying to go.
Yeah.
Can feel inauthentic. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, you see this sometimes, like when you have a transition in anything, sometimes you can feel like it's the fake it till you make it thing.
Yeah.
So there's actually, I don't think anything wrong with the fake it till you make it because you're trying to make it, because you're not going to stay in the fake it.
Right.
Right. So even on the worship team, right, you can have people that are faking worshiping. Right? And I think the odd time that can be true, you've had a fight with your spouse the night before, your kids aren't cooperating, you're exhausted from life, and you've got to minister to these people. And so you raise your hands and you whatever, and in that moment it feels empty.
Right.
And I think that's okay. It's where you're constantly going up and pretending like this God that you're trying to lead other people to, that becomes a problem.
What comes to my mind is Jesus talking about people fasting.
Yeah.
And when you fast, put oil on your head and make yourself presentable. Well, but I'm fasting. If I'm fasting, I'm probably feeling a little bit miserable. So being authentic in that case is I'm going to let everybody know that I'm miserable.
Right.
But that's only going to get you so far.
Right.
Right. And so Jesus is saying even, don't be like the people who go and pray really loud prayers.
Right. Tear their garments.
And like, look at me, everyone. Sometimes for the sake of the people, you need to do things that, it's interesting you're saying it makes you feel inauthentic.
Right.
Maybe we use that as an excuse sometimes. Well, I don't want to be unauthentic, so I'm just going to be me.
Well, yes. And so what you're talking about is the authenticity paradox. And so what that says is that I'm not going to challenge myself, and I'm not going to press forward to be bigger, because I want to be genuinely myself, and my genuine self doesn't want to do that anymore. So how I justify that is to say that if I push myself, well, then I'm crossing my boundary of integrity, and I'm crossing my boundary of my own values. So I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to stay authentically me, but I'm going to stay in the same place that I've always been. And so maybe that's worked for a time. But if you want to grow and you want to go somewhere, sometimes you have to push yourself, and it's going to feel a little bit inauthentic.
Right.
And I think that's okay.
And feeling inauthentic and being inauthentic, I think, are two different things. I think that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
When I've had a bad night, like a Saturday night, and I get up on Sunday morning and I need to lead worship, I think it would be selfish of me. Now, there's limits to this, and I've crossed the limit before, and I'll explain that in a second. But I think it would be selfish of me to say, I had a bad night last night, so worship's going to be mediocre today.
Right.
Or I'm only going to, give it half of what I could.
Can you imagine if you chose to do that?
Yeah.
It'd be horrible.
Even in terms of like, sometimes it comes out where somebody's living in sin, or they've got a sin in their life, and yet they're preachers or they're worship leaders, and everything's like, that service was amazing. I can't believe that person's living in sin. I think there's an understanding that God loves people.
Yeah.
Right. And so even you can have talent that will take you so far, but your character needs to be rising with that talent.
Yeah.
So to speak. And so God will care more about a people in a church setting, let's say in a worship service. God cares about those 400 people, 200 people, 1,000 people. And so he has people in positions, and they get to choose how they act. They get to choose what their life is like. So they get that choice, but he still cares about people. So you can still have encounters with God corporately.
Yeah.
But personally, to be inauthentic and to just fake it doesn't work. You can't hide from God.
Right.
He knows who you are. You need to be yourself with him. And I think you said it earlier too. If you find yourself regularly getting on a stage and leading worship, or in a position of leadership in a church, or even in your work or in your job, and you're consistently faking it,
Yeah.
then you need to really examine, is this the right fit for you?
Mm-hmm. Or the right fit for now.
Or the right fit for now.
You're going to make yourself sick. You're going to burn out.
Yep.
Because you do need to live from a place of, it's that living well inside of you.
Yeah. So there's that balance between sometimes, you do have to get up and, put a
do what you don't
nice
feel like doing.
face on and just do it. Yeah. But if you're living like that all the time, you need to examine, maybe this is not the authentic plan for you.
Mm-hmm. And what do I need to do to make that better? Because maybe God is calling you to that thing, but you're not doing the things that are going to help propel you forward in that, and not in a real way, right? Because I think sometimes we can move forward in ministry, but we don't feel any closer to God, and I think he really is the life source.
Yeah.
So I think the main thing in all of it, regardless of how much we're walking in authenticity, in ugliness, in beautiful, whatever it is we're producing, it all comes back to spending time with him.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean that you have to spend hours and hours and hours, although I love that. You can spend 10 minutes with him and be so refreshed and able to accomplish so much more. And it will even feel more authentic too, right? When you've done that and you've spent time with him and he said something to you and you get a scripture that means something deeper this time than the last time that you read it. And so I think that's the thing, is when we're feeling dry and when we're questioning whether we are being authentic, I think we got to go back to the source.
Yeah,
who gives us our authenticity.
So just as we wind this down here, what are some things that people can do to help live their most authentic life? Mm-hmm. What are some questions that they can ask themselves? What are some things that they could do today, right now, as soon as this is done, to help them live their very best authentic life?
Well, I think for me, the answer is going to God with that question. And really be willing to listen to what he has to say, and be willing to express the things that I want to say that might be ugly, that I've even been hiding from God, because you're not fooling yourself. He already knows, right? So to go to him and go, okay, God, where are the places in my life where I'm feeling dry, I'm feeling drained, I'm feeling empty, I'm feeling bitter, even, because if bitterness is the undealt with anger, then walk with me through this, God, because I want to feel full in my life. And I know you want fullness of life for me. So I really want to take stock of what's going on inside of me. Mm-hmm. I think that's the first thing.
Yeah. I think another thing people can do is ask the question, what does God think about me? Yeah. And maybe we can post this in the show notes or wherever people to get, but there's a series of little cards that I've often given to people, or just even this worksheet. And it's places in the Bible where God says, this is what I think about you. And sometimes even starting right from there, if we start from that encouragement of knowing what God really thinks about us, because I think sometimes we tend to hide our true self because we're worried, as Christians anyways, we're worried about what God really thinks of that true self. But he created us. Yeah. Right? Psalm 139, I formed you in your mother's womb. Mm-hmm. but before you were born, I knew you.
Yeah.
He knows us better than we know ourselves.
Yeah.
So going to him is an important part of living an authentic life and knowing what he says about us.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think the third thing to helping you live an authentic life is to go to mattandjen.ca and sign up for the newsletter.
It's probably a good move.
Yeah.
No, but you know, this is the thing is we want to walk authentically.
Yeah, we do.
And we want to walk authentically with you. Some of my favorite people are the people who look me straight in the face and go, I screwed up.
Yeah.
I love those people.
Yeah.
Because they're really trying.
Yeah.
You know, they really want to be more instead of just pretending and doing more, because Jesus is so rich. And we can have that richness now. We don't have to wait for heaven to live in that. And so if our richness is even just, let's put aside all the fake stuff in our lives. And so you're just starting at square one of authenticity. Hallelujah. You're way past all the mountains of fake whatever that you've created for yourself or other people have created for you. Like, please live authentically, because that's where you're going to get life.
Yeah.
And you're going to be healthier.
You're going to be healthier, and you're going to be probably nicer to be around.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. All right. We're going to end it there. Thank you guys for listening. So there it is, everyone. Being authentic is really important, but sometimes it is also important to be inauthentic. We're wanting to be as authentic as possible. And to help us with that, we'd love your feedback. Let us know what you think of the podcast. Maybe you could go to iTunes and leave us a rating or a review would be amazing. It helps the podcast grow, and we really would love to hear the input. To follow us, as always, and stay up to speed on what we're doing, you can go to mattandjen.ca, sign up for the newsletter, or you'll find us on Facebook at facebook.com/mattandjenmusic, or by seeing all of our pictures on Instagram at mattandjenmusic. Don't forget to check in next week. And until then, guys, keep cooking. Keep cooking. Ugh. We'll get it.